Alexis Dornier, thank you very much to join this conversation that is dedicated to the renovation of the Roquebrune Art Museum. We are extremely proud and grateful and honored about your contribution to the renovation of the museum. As you know, the Roquebrune Art Museum exists as a contemporary art since 2010. The building was renovated by David Chipperfield. This building is a very historical building created in 1932. So that is a long history related to culture, to art, and also the activation of very contemporary art projects from the Roquebrune Art Museum. And 2 years ago, it was really a great pleasure to meet with you and to know more about your project. So because we plan to have this interview and to share with the audience the information that we accumulated during our exchanges, could you please first introduce yourself, your company, and some of the realizations that you might have achieved, and that could be helpful to have a sense of aesthetic or simply architectural practices. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for the kind introduction, Laris. So yeah, I'm Alexis Dornier. I do architecture and design, and we are based out of Bali. We're a group of about almost 30 designers and architects. I'm originally from Germany, and I was lucky enough to meet the Roquebrune Art Museum team 2 years ago, and this conversation turned into a fruitful interior design concept and a rerouting concept for the museum, which we found necessary as a possible upgrade. And this is a little bit outside of the sort of so-called traditional works that we have been producing over the past 10 years, simply because we're focusing on hotels and resorts and private residences and small-scale cabins. And so we're producing our design through the collaboration and conversation with our partners and clients. So we form an alliance with them, and therefore, you know, every outcome is the exact reflection of that collaboration, which in the case of the Roquebrune Museum was a very fun one. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this project in specific that we were able to conceive.
Can you please precise a bit, I would say, the vision or the spirit of your projects? Are you interested in sustainability? How do you include the different architectural elements with a broadened vision in the context of environment or into a city? Can you give us some more outputs about this?
Yes, so I feel that context is a fundamental key word that has to be used when producing architectural design. So is empathy, right? You put yourself into someone else's shoes, you know, from the operator to the developer to the visitor of, in this case, a museum. It is almost vital to put yourself in other positions and other perspectives. So I feel it's a very humble process. Architectural design should not just be a eruption of one's own voluptuous creativity. No, it should be more than that. It should actually have interest and sincerity in other people and institutions and context. So why is that very exciting to me? It is because that way, you know, I am feeling challenged, and I'm also inspired by how other people see the world. And that is why we include this aspect in all of our work. And that's why our work is very versatile. There's no certain signature in the architecture, at least not directly, but there is a certain method of integration and collaboration. And that's why the best outcome is the outcome that is a surprise in a positive way to everyone that's in the team. And in talking about context for Rock Band, it was a challenge to work, in such a historic building and such a important place in the city, and also done, or the renovation that has been done and the urban planning surrounding the museum by David Chipperfield is obviously a very amazing and talented architect. And how does one deal with that, right? And how does one integrate, one's own creative contribution into a building like that has been carefully restored by David. So, and this is how we were talking and establishing an attitude towards that. So anything that comes in as an addition, for example, furniture or other parts that we needed to improve the experience, that was a very exciting investigation. Also in terms of materiality and form, how can you strengthen what is existing, and how can you not blur the DNA and the nature of the building itself and the successful renovation of the building.
Before we come to the Rockwool Art Museum renovation, do you have in mind one of the projects that can reflect the most precisely the spirit of your realizations? For example, you said you are based in Bali, and I know also that you developed different projects connected with nature. I know you sent to me some information about the amazing project on Uluwatu that is building a series of houses that is intimately and discreetly connected with the nature. As we know, Uluwatu is a very rocky area in Bali, and how do you connect with this environment?
I think as a sort of designer, one is always challenged with like how much is enough and how much contribution is actually necessary. In the case of Uluwatu and the Uluwatu Surf Villas, as the name of the resort in which we were doing a few very distinct buildings, that was exactly one of the key decisions we had to take. How loud is the architecture, or how much does it step back, or how much does it frame what's already there, which is a magnificent context in form of environment. You can look at the ocean and mountains and jungle and rocks and cliffs, and how does one not overshadow that, but actually frame this and put it into context, so both of these aspects are not losing their strength. So I feel that there may be some pieces of architecture out there which don't have enough plasticity and don't have enough openness and understatement to let the place, the spirit of the place, really shine. And this is something that we really emphasize on in our work, is how can we frame what's already there? How can we contribute to the the landscape format of depicting nature, and how can we contribute to the silhouette in a meaningful way, using materials that are sort of almost seamlessly blending into nature, understanding the color grade and the gradient of the different, tones that makes a landscape very memorable. And to transpose that the color grade and to transpose the palette into a built environment, that is something that is really fun to do and very important for us in our architectural design process. We don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. We want to celebrate the continuity of that architecture while not being random. We still want to be iconic, and we still want to add to the memorable environment when guests and people are coming to that place.
Yeah, when we look at this project called the House Carbon, right? I can see that there are a lot of very simple materials like the wood or cement. Do you have specific interest in this or that material that can convey a kind of experience or also daily living for the people using these architectures?
I believe that architecture is almost, or successful architecture is almost like writing a program. It's a chain of decisions put together, and then you can change the attributes and you know exactly what you're doing within a given framework. So I think the framework must be clear enough to give orientation, which is something I believe everyone loves about architecture. We are defining all surfaces of the space that then create the atmosphere through a coding of different materials that give us then this sense of orientation, therefore comfort in the built environments. So the floor has a different texture and material. The gesture of the roof as being or creating a shelter is another aspect or another attribute of the building or of the architecture, and therefore it is coded differently because it's its own unique element, and that element sits on solid pieces of wall, and these walls are being coated with another material, which is stone and rock. And then if you come closer, there is a different aperture and a different scale in the specific texture that also resembles the same DNA as the overall organization of the building, right? So you have this interplay and this fascination for ornament that you can find in the smallest bits and pieces of the building, but then you can also see it in the overall floor plan and the gesture in which the house or the building sits in its environment. And again, the coding and a very simple coding, I believe, creates more strength in the architectural concept, and therefore it is easier for us to memorize things, as it's not creating a whole lot of chaos. No, it should soothe and calm the atmosphere and therefore the experience for the human being that's walking around in it.
Yeah, exactly. When I look at these pictures, there's always this kind of very strong connection between intimacy, quietness, and openness with the outside or with some elements of the environment. So because also I think what we created for the Rockwool Art Museum is based on this different, maybe opposite at the beginning between the intimacy of the experience and also the way the space can be open and connected. How do you feel about this?
I think that you have a sort of intuitive, sort of underlying interest in whatever it is one does, you know, whenever it is one wants to contribute, in our case, to the architectural design world, or to the Rockbund Art Museum in specificity. So we chose materials and shapes that are not found in the color palette of the historic museum and its architectural design. We also did not choose any colors or any textures or materials found in David Chipperfield's renovation aspects. And why did we not do that is we wanted to create something specific in the overall generic environment, which is coated in black, white, and stone as the sort of materials of the white box in itself that the museum has to consist of as a sequence of spaces that will host art. So how can we contribute to this color palette in a complementary way? And therefore there's nothing round in the building to be found per se, and there's nothing out of wood to be found in the building per se. So that's why we thought this is the third color, and this is the third element that will be injected in the common areas where people are gathering and taking a rest, or being prepared or becoming prepared for then taking in all the artworks then in the upper floors. So we refrained from changing anything in the gallery spaces or adding anything in the gallery spaces, because the neutral background is vital for artists and their work to shine. As then in the lobbies and in the entrance hall, and also the cafeteria and roof terrace, this is the moment where we can add a sense of comfort and a sense of coziness in these areas of resting. So I think that was one of the aspects that.
I start again with the question related to the Rockbund Art Museum. The Rockbund Art Museum is a very historical building created in 1933 by the George Wilson architect. It was also one of the very first museum as a Western model to appear in China in a colonial context, since the Royal Asiatic Society was developing this area of the Bund. And so the museum is quite unique in its architecture. We have a very vertical module, like a column, going from the first floor to the sixth floor. I'm very curious about your first experience of the building when you really entered the museum, and what was your feeling, and what did you what was striking for you as a visitor of the building?
So the first time I seen the building from the outside, I was struck by its monumental power and strength and appearance. And I thought that this was a very timeless and monumental figure in the urban context. So, you know, the arches would invite one to discover something inside an almost mystical context, right? So very thick walls, very robust and strong and everlasting architecture, it seemed to me. And then once inside the space, it was almost like a maze of different gallery spaces that are carefully sort of crafted so they kind of press out the the condition to the outside. So there's a couple of windows that then frame the lobby experience, and you can get a glimpse on the urban context again. And inside these sequence of galleries, you had amazing architecture that was not as static as the container. It was very fluid. It was very much alive, and I feel the curation of the works and how they were presented was very extremely taken care of, extremely calculated and intentional. Just how the exhibitions were, how the exhibition was designed. Also how the exhibition reacted on the spaces, and they would contribute and rather not disrupt, but contribute in a positive way the strength of the building, while still, making the visitor change its perspective on it. So, there's a specific element added inside, then the generic vessel becomes much stronger, right? As opposed to watering down. And so I feel that curators have a very important job especially in this building, as it is so strong in its character, right? And how do you frame and work with that? And I think that must be quite difficult and quite challenging at times. So that's what went through my mind when I first came through to experience the building and the exhibition by the time. And it was a very fascinating experience, as the museum experience is known from Europe, which is where I'm from, but much different. And I like the compactness and the small scale, or the intimate scale of the museum itself. So that was very new to me, where you could find almost like find treasures inside a solid treasure box.
I think also the contribution of David Chipperfield was very decisive when you talk about the massiveness and of the building from the outside, and when you enter inside the museum, there is this very, I would say, minimal or elegant dialogue between some historical elements, like you mentioned the Art Deco windows, the play with the daylight and the artificial light inside, but also the way David also conceived the different galleries, because each floor has the same surface, but the volume or the height also of each gallery is different. So you have a totally different experience from one floor to another. That is also one precious element as the director, but also with the curators and the artists to work on this building, is this fascinating experience that also give human scale to the building, that contrasts also with the outside. So what was also your experience related to the David Chipperfield elements that also makes this building quite unique? When I say what is your feeling, is also, it can be a positive one, but also some limitation that might be the start also for us with you to conceive or to reconceive the museum.
David is known for his extraordinary sort of restoration projects. For example, the new National Gallery in Germany was just in Berlin, was recently completed, and there is such a high level of care, and I believe a lot of research being done, in that restoration process. You're almost like an archaeologist, right? So you would then, as you were mentioning, Laris, the very sort of minimal changes, or the very careful integration of new elements, give it almost like almost very sacral and almost like non-human character. And I think that the atmosphere in the lobbies and in the common spaces and areas could be embracing the visitor more in a more direct dialogue, as opposed to the galleries, which need to be neutral, you know, by their sheer functionality. Then these other spaces could be a few degrees warmer. And what I mean by that is just, you know, we're still human. It's not all about the rigidity of conservation, and so we can also learn and be open for a new, for progression and a certain sense of dynamism, you know, and I think this is where we started off contributing through our design.
Exactly. I remember the very first meeting we had, you and me. I was also talking about the change of the museum because we are really contributing to rethink the format of the museum. So it's all related to how today a museum is not only producing exhibitions, but also is this more intimate connection with the audience. So it implies also a new way of circulating and experiencing the space. And also the art projects are also developing in not only very formatted 2 or 3 months exhibitions, but now we are conceiving like projects that can last 2 to 3 years. So the way we can reactivate the museum, connecting with the audience, and also going along with the artist project that can have a lot of variations is becoming very, very important. And then from my side, I was trying to imagine the museum as a boat, and also to have this kind of more oceanic vision of the museum that is related to fluidity, ondulation, vibration, resonance. And I think that that was one of the main motivation coming to you, because that we were thinking that that could be an interesting new dialogue between the heritage of the building, the renovation from David, and with your contribution. And I was very fascinated also by the way you started to propose some elements related to especially the ground floor and to the 6th and the 7th floor, how we can create better conditions to connect with the audience. I just take the example, we have the picture of the ground floor here of the plan. We can see that inside the kind of geometrical existing architecture and the contribution of David, you input some curves or some kind of ondulation that also contradict a kind of symmetry or very rigid geometrical aspect. Can you tell me more about this this kind of new elements that was, I think, the very starting point of your concept for the renovation of the museum?
The starting point was, how can I sort of maintain this rigidity and strength and also symmetry of the floor plan and the sort of DNA of the museum, but how can I at the same time invite the visitor to complete, or in an imaginative sense, complete forms, and in this case circle segments, you know, transcending walls and transcending the very strictly defined space. So yes, these circle segments are almost randomly placed, of course, in respect to the functions which have to be added to the museum, like you know, storage and counters and coffee shops and stuff like that. but how can I invite the visitor to, in an imaginary way, complete these circular segments, and then therefore kind of blur the boundaries and go into a more fluid experience of the space. And that was the starting point of the concept, was to add some specific and very alienated forms to the generic environment, or to the generic and static sort of grid-based architecture.
I think is a very interesting point, because the way we want to challenge ourselves as a museum, but also to connect better with the audience, is also to integrate the definition of the audience also as a contributor, rather than someone who is coming only to pay for the ticket and to go to visit the exhibition. But it's also how the question of time and the question of each individual need to enjoy and to experience both the building and the different materials we can offer to the audience. It can be a reading room, it can be the shop, it can be the cafe, and this first experience is really decisive. And also these kind of curves and round shape are contradicting the symmetry of the building. And I think it's not about opposition, but it's more about enriching and dialoguing with the building, which is very precious. And then I'm also curious about the materials you added to the project, because the building is made mainly of cement and white walls, but also now you try to integrate some wooden elements, mirrors, and also the kind of reflection with the plexiglass elements. So how did you manage to conceive this first floor, for example, with this? Can you precise first the different materials you are using for the ground floor of the museum?
Laris, you and I, we had some exciting conversations about this oceanic aspect on the dynamics and fluidity. And I think this may have also triggered some thoughts about some formal familiarity to nautical navigational instruments and circles and pieces of a watch or a clock, and also of a compass. And what you had mentioned, so these fragments that may be completed by the reflecting planes, which are the mirrors that are sort of disguising and therefore blurring the brackets and boundary of the rectangular space. You almost kind of you wander and explore in a very ephemeral space, and something that is non-defined. It's almost like an optical illusion of these fragments that then get multiplied in these mirroring planes, and also these sort of plexiglass curved planes as well. So I thought that was almost like a Inception-like dream world experience in there, where we invite the visitor to also contribute intellectually by experiencing the space, and then also going inside these timepieces and inside these sort of nautical navigational instruments by going behind walls, and that also kind of in a playful way contributes the maze-like overall experience wandering through the organism of the rest of the museum. And the materials were chosen like in these wooden elements. I call them just circle segments or nautical navigational instrument pieces or timepieces, were chosen to complement the neutrality of what the actual museum consists of as a vessel for art in the other floors. But in the ground floor, in the 6th and 7th floor, we have the opportunity to playfully interact with that in form of more of an installation and less of an interior design. So the installative character can impose also that we can change certain and sort of reset the clock and reset time, by changing certain furnitures, and I think that way the space can change, consecutively by the way it's being used.
I remember also before we started the renovation, we were talking a lot with the Rockwool Art Museum team, and especially the operation team, about the necessity to recreate a better condition for the visitors, and the operation team to connect means that it's also about circulation, when I talk about fluidity, is also how the operation team does not stand only behind the reception desk. That was at the time a very heavy module, and just like a separation, between the audience and the team. So the way you open up the space with different island, I would say, as you use these kind of fragments or spheric elements, that allows now also a kind of breathing, a kind of more engaged way for the team to connect with each of the audience and to offer them a proper service that can be related to the introduction of the art projects, or that can be just a gesture of service, having a coffee or enjoying the time and the building, and then of course experiencing the exhibition. Also, the new element of the renovation is related to this question of the circulation from the outside of the building. I think it's also maybe invisible contribution from you that I really much appreciate, is that when you create these circumvolutions with these different elements, it allows us also to question how can we welcome the visitors also from outside, because in the future there will be a public square, and also the way we can really integrate the outside to the inside. That is another something that is very precious for us. And then when the visitors are coming inside the museum, that in the future they will have the choice to go either from the lift on the east side that will be managed to bring the visitors on the 5th floor, or to go from the existing stairwell on the east side of the building. So it creates also new ways and multiple paths for the visitors to experience the architecture of the building, but also the exhibition. I mean, I would say it's less authoritative, but it's more like offering different perspectives and angles to the building. So I'm also wondering if you have more comments about these design elements that can allow more fluidity for the visitors and for the team to live inside the museum, not only to visit.
I think the ability to find symbols that are simple enough to conceive a story is essential to a successful design. And the nature of the circle is, depending where you are in relation to the outline, you either include it or exclude it. So there's an inclusive and exclusive attribute in relationship to the object. And once you fragment that circle, you're constantly being challenged by, by these two sort of juxtapositions, or this paradox, right? And I feel that within the given options, in terms of conservation, what it is that we can do, what we're allowed to do by the authorities, that we're still within the plane of sort of loose furniture or installation. We can't really change the building's nature. I think that was a simple enough symbolism that allows the visitor to playfully interact with these thoughts on, exclusivity and inclusivity. And also the floor plan and how these two different entrances work is an exciting aspect about the design, because it almost works like a catalyst or an organ that you are being sort of led through. And there are certain things that you can experience. For example, if you choose to sit in a sort of circular segment in a bench, this is inviting to have conversations, yet at the same time, you shield yourself off from others. So you exclude people that are not in this sort of circle or circle segment. So I think just passing through that, almost like a flipper or almost like a game, you can experience different routes. You can discover things, like sort of exhibited elements or shop items. I think that was one of the other layers of the design, intellectual layers of the design, and what it should provide. And then at last, we were hoping that these circular fragments can already be found on the outside surrounding the building. It's almost like leaving traces behind or leading the visitor inside the building or through the building by creating, sort of traces and hints, almost like a way or pathfinding system.
And I'm thinking especially the connection between the ground floor and the 6th floor and the 7th floor. I don't know if we have some pictures of these 6 floors, because of course the renovation include also a more professional aspect of the galleries that we are innovating, related to the humidity control and the cleanness of the walls and the ground. But yes, when we watch this totally different cafe from before, what was is there a connection for you between the ground floor and the 6th floor? That is a kind of elevation, but also a kind of enrichment of these circular elements and the way people can better socialize or mingle. Do you have any comments with this?
Sort of traces, let's call them, these circular fragment traces are reoccurring whenever there are sort of spaces that are not directly dedicated to the exhibition of art. So it's almost like walking through the snow, and or like a wayfinding system, where when you pop up in the 6th floor, you're rediscovering what on another plane, what you have already been introduced to, hopefully on the streetscape, then in the lobby, and then we bring that onto the 6th floor. And the reflection planes or the mirror planes were added to react on the narrow character of the found spaces, to visually widen them up, and to the attempt to find a medium that breaks up this sort of the character of these long, sort of almost hose-like spaces, and to hopefully make them more inviting to a lasting stay. And that's why, you know, as I was mentioning, different layers and aspects on the choice of your architectural or your design tools. Hopefully, you know, there is the romantic sort of narrative on the oceanic, the fluidity. There is this aspect on just the sheer character of the circle or circular segment, by either being inclusive or exclusive, that at the same time reminds one of like nautical navigational instruments, that at the same time is a stark contrast to the orthogonality of the character or the architecture or the heritage architecture of the museum itself. And then hopefully also the usability of these circles and circular segments that are trying to improve a very challenging space found on the 6th floor. And we use mirror planes to complete these circles, to again, like at least in an imaginary world, transcend these walls and break or dissolve these walls in which these spaces were initially designed. And I think that is why it is a successful contribution, because it is tackling many layers, you know, aside from the functional additions and the romantic narratives and so forth. And I feel, yeah, I'm very pleased that we've arrived at a product like this one.
Yeah, I fully agree. And because also, I don't know if you will agree with this a concept or practice of something sensual, or something that is also warmer, because I don't think there's a kind of paradox or opposition between the symmetry of the building and something that is also bringing a kind of other experience with these curves and these round shape elements that invite the visitor maybe also to experience differently the architecture. So also for the cafe, we plan not only to use it as a simple place to have a drink, but really to input some, I would say, a presence or a spirit related to some of the like music elements or reflection or reading act that can be also very enriching for the museum. And maybe also my last question is the connection with the outside. I remember at the beginning of the project, when we talked, you had a very strong interest on the terrace and the 7th floor, how to open up to not only the outside, but to something that is beyond the reality, and something that is also creating another jump into an open space that I think is very important for the 6th floor and the 7th floor. Can you bring us some information or ideas about how important could be the connection of the museum with the top floor of the museum?
To me, the top floor was the opportunity to just experience and enjoy the amazing view on, you know, on the Bund area, and I thought that the gaze and is that you can have up there is a very sort of circumferential experience, like a very all-encompassing experience. So you all of a sudden have no walls and you're just completely free. And I think that is almost like a climax when traveling around this choreography of spaces inside. You just all of a sudden you pop out and you can experience the you know, another plane of your environment. And I thought that, you know, we would have to, or we would hopefully be able to do something there, and sort of, you know, take reference to the surrounding.
Yeah, I think for the team is also another aspect that is very important is also how can we activate some forms of events or gatherings, because I think what we want to develop more in the future, and the renovation of from the ground floor to the 6th and the 7th floor will help us very much to conceive some projects related to either music sessions or gathering events with performance and so on. So thank you very much for this contribution. It's really something that is very precious for the future of the museum. The new vision of the museum is related to the transformation of the institution, because globally we can see that we have different periods with monumental institution. And from the Rockwood Art Museum, because the building is a very human scale, I would say, it's not like a huge museum, and we really cherish this. And I think the contribution of David Chipperfield and Alexis Dornier are very precious in this way. It helps us to each time reinvent the projects. But as I said today, the museum industry is very much oriented to the productivity of or an ongoing productivism of exhibition. And what we are trying to achieve at the Rockwood Art Museum is also to diversify the projects, the formats of the projects, not only being inviting the visitor to consume the exhibition, but also to engage with the art projects that can be an existing exhibition, that can be also related to research, because the Rockwood Art Museum is developing a lot of research-based projects. We are also creating new commissions to artists working in China, in Asia, especially, and then we are developing cooperation with the Asian scene and international art scene. So all this makes the museum much more complex than a place to be. But the place to be is also very important to conceive as an open space, and also the way the people can engage in, I would say, not only object to see, but to engage with the substance, to engage with the content of the project. So it requires time, and that's why the physicality of the museum is very, very important. I really wish that the people not only come to the museum to see the artworks, but they can come to have more materials, I would say, that can be visual, that can be sonic, that can be textual, that can be also spending time to see the light coming in the museum, and to experience the furniture, and to enjoy simply their own presence. I think this is something that is maybe missing in the institutions today that are delivering exhibitions, but also we need to really gather together, and this kind of social aspect of the project is very important. And I think the contribution of Alexi is precious in this way.
Well, I'm very thankful for, you know, for the opportunity given. Like, and I felt that there was always an open ear for my opinions, and I think we've navigated, you know, through the space of what's possible. And, you know, of course, the opportunities on my end is doing design and not intervening with architecture were set. And that being said, like, of course, we both Laris and the team and everyone, we're dreaming about like maybe additional architectural elements on top of the rooftop, you know, which would invite, you know, a whole nother opportunity to host people, you know, even when it's raining or when it's snowing or and sort of things. We were dreaming up another glass box on the building and all these sorts of things. But I feel our job is to keep dreaming and to propose things that are impossible to propose or to make in the end, but at least just dreaming up possibilities beyond of what's allowed and what's regulated was fun. And I'm, as I said, I'm very happy with all the stuff that was able to be changed, and to, you know, like we were reconfiguring the service elevator to bring guests up on the and start the exhibition in different parts of and different galleries. So I think we've reached a lot together, and, you know, as it's quite an impressive building, I'm just happy that we could, you know, play a small part in this renovation. One of the highlights for me was to be able to introduce a new formal language to something that is very monumental and very strong, and to work with sort of unconventional shapes in that respect, while still celebrating a material that is very close to us humans, like in our case, wood. And there's a very sensual aspect about this. And I think it may complete well to, you know, to the formal bracket of the space given to showcase art. And in total, I hope this will last for a few years to come. And yeah, once again, I'm happy to see all these pictures and the substantial improvements that were added on so many levels to the museum.
And again, there's no opposition between the renovation of David, but it's really how do we enrich the new vision of the museum and the experience of the audience that is also changing radically in the future. So thank you very much, Alexi.